Hey guys, it's me. So I've been interested in doing talkover videos for a while, where the person draws and then they say stuff over it. Because I've been kind of obsessed with those lately, and I don't know, I just think they're neat and I'd like to make my own. Anyway, I asked on Twitter for like what topics people were interested in having me cover. And one of the suggestions was LGBT plus characters in comics, which originally I wasn't so sure I wanted to do, but it's, Pride Month, so, fuck it, man. Um, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about LGBT plus characters in comics. This is unscripted, so I apologize if I'm stupid or rambly or whatever. Anyway, this is, something that I think about a lot because, I'm trans, I'm transmasculine, non-binary to be specific. And also, I'm, pansexual. I'm in a relationship with another transmasculine, non-binary person. So anyway, this is a thing I think about a lot because it affects my life a lot because, you know, I'm transitioning and that junk. Always, I've always had LGBT plus characters in my work, and I've gotten, reactions from people about that. Mostly saying that, like, oh, you're pandering, or, you're doing this for an agenda. And let me be clear here, I'm not pandering to anybody but myself. I write this shit because that's what I want to write. I feel like writing about gay and trans people. That's what I like to write about. Those are the characters I like to write about. If you want stories where there are a lot of cis and straight characters, you can, direct yourself to most other media. Anyway, it's always been important to me to have good representation in my work, just in general, because it was, other pieces of fictional media that kind of helped me come to terms with both my sexuality and my gender. Was one comic in specific that made me go like, oh, hey, I do like girls, huh? So I've, it's something I want to portray in my own work, honestly, in the hopes that maybe it'll help other people who are struggling with their sexuality or their gender identity. Um, anyway, my first comic didn't really fuck around with gender very much because at the time I thought I was cis, which one of the reasons I'm not super fond of my first comic is because it was made during that time period when I was repressing a lot of my junk, a lot of my issues in regards to my gender. And that kind of, feel like came through in, not necessarily in my work, but it made me kind of miserable. So I associate that comic with a very miserable point in time in my life. Anyway, with Fragile, there's more gender stuff. Obviously, we've got non-binary characters, we've got trans characters. Clockwork was actually the first trans character I ever made. And at first I was very frightened to write them because I was like, I don't know, am I going to fuck this up? I don't know any non-binary people. I'm like, you fool, look in a fucking mirror. But at the time, of course, I didn't know. So anyway, a lot of the stuff with Clockwork was a lot of projections of my own dysphoria. And I think particularly with if you're going to write characters who are LGBT plus, having personal experience in struggles related to that is useful, but not necessarily the end all be all. There are a lot of good LGBT plus characters written by people who are cis and straight. And in general, you also need to like listen to other people's experiences. There's some things in Fragile I might change about the representation of the trans characters. Not to say that I'm necessarily 100% unhappy with how I portrayed some of the stuff, but I might go back and change it a little bit. But I'm not unhappy that I made the characters trans, and I'm not going to write characters who are ashamed of being trans or hate themselves for being trans. Webcomics are one of the best places to be right now if you want some good representation of LGBT plus people. Like, seriously, like, it's great. I always feel really bad for people in the community who aren't interested in webcomics because outside of webcomics, pretty much all you're going to get is like, crumbs. But in webcomics, it's just like a bus. There's like a huge amount. I think that's because there's very little gatekeeping in webcomics, and that is what makes it easier for people to just do whatever. Like, that's what one of the things that draws me to webcomics is nobody can stop me This is mine. I own this. Nobody can stop me. It's 100% me. I can make everybody gay if I want, or I can do whatever the hell I want, you know? Whereas if you're writing for like a publishing company or, you know, like, I don't know, a syndicated comic strip, you know, editors or people might be like, you can't put this in here. And, you know, that's your job. So you have to do what they say, you know? Um, so I think that's one of the great things about webcomics. And I think one of the reasons why there's a lot more representation in webcomics than in other mediums. I really, 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 really love webcomics, if, you know, you hadn't guessed. In general, I'm not super interested in writing about homophobia and transphobia, aside from things that are autobiographical. Like, I'm doing an autobiographical comic about my gender and my transition. And obviously, you know, stuff like that's going to be in there. But in general, nowadays, if I'm writing, like, especially if I'm writing a high fantasy world, I'm not particularly interested in writing about that. I always feel kind of weird billing Fragile as an LGBT comic when it's not really like about those issues at all. It's just kind of this is an aspect of, you know, the characters, and this is an aspect of the relationships, you know? And it's mostly about other stuff because I'm more interested in writing about other stuff than that, if I'm going to be real. Was really hungry for representation as a young teenager because all of the books that had gay or trans characters in them were just like specifically about that, and I didn't particularly want to read about that. I just wanted to read books where gay and trans characters fought dragons, which I eventually found. And that's in general what I'm interested in writing about. I want to write stories about, you know, LGBT people like going on adventures and doing stuff. Anyway, I might as well talk about, since, you know, this is playing over Pride Speed Paint, I might as well talk about the identities of these characters. We have Micah, who I use the genderqueer flag for them because I don't know, that seemed more right for them than the non-binary flag. Micah's great. Love Micah. Love this funky wolf. And then the driver and Vare, two minor characters. I was iffy on including them because their identities do not come up, but like, hey, why not? Side note, I get weirded out by people who get really offended when you know your character's sexualities and or gender identities, like even when it's not relevant to the plot. Like, I know my character's favorite colors, and that's not really relevant to the plot, but you're not out here trying to tear my throat out because I know that, huh? Are you? You know? And in general, it's a whole bag of worms. It's a whole bag of worms I need to address. Yeah, characters shouldn't be gay or trans just to forward the plot. Usually, if there's a plot reason for a character to be gay or trans, or, you know, bisexual or pansexual or asexual or aromantic or whatever, then that's fine. But like, people in real life aren't gay or trans or, you know, to further the plot. And plus, also, you wouldn't be saying, you know, a character has to have a reason to be cis or straight. Like, that cis or straight isn't the default. Sorry, guys. Anyway, the driver is agender and Vare is a lesbian. Neither of these things come up, but I know them. Anyway, I didn't want Micah to be all by their lonesome. Although, you know, these two don't make such great company because they run a murder wagon, but I mean, just because you run a murder wagon doesn't mean you don't get to be proud of who you are. Anyway, this was kind of long and rambly and weird, and I don't know if everything I said was like super informed or something somebody hadn't said before, but in conclusion, you know, write all the LGBT plus characters you want, live your best life, read my webcomic, and if you want me to make more videos like this, tell me what topics you might be interested in seeing me cover, because I do want to make more like this, and I don't have a ton of ideas. All right, see y'all later.